I don't know about you, but I was really looking forward to the game between France and Australia this weekend at the Stade de France, and for me it was always going to be a really interesting game. Could Eddie Jones's Wallabies turn on a surprising win, or were the French going to be too dominant? Let's check out in this video what happened. Bonjour and welcome to Inside Rugby. My name's Mark. I'm a Kiwi guy living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. A huge rugby fan, but at the moment we've got a hurricane watch going on. So some people have asked me to show you some sights of Cancun during my videos, and I will be doing that in the not too distant future. We're just got to wait for this big, terrible dark cloud to move on and head north, which we're hoping it will do today or tomorrow. So let's get into the rugby, and it was time for the Australian Wallabies to head to the Stade de France to play against a French team that's been looking pretty impressive so far in the warm-up series to this year's Rugby World Cup. And of course, the French are going to have all that pressure of their home nation on them as they go forward throughout this World Cup. Now, a lot of people on this channel don't like Eddie Jones. You've made that point very clear. I'm actually a fan of Eddie Jones. I think he's really good for rugby. He's an entertaining chap, and he doesn't mince his words too much with the media these days, which I think is a great thing for rugby. We need personalities in the game, and if nothing else, Eddie Jones brings that. But it was going to be really good to see what the transformation in this team for the Wallabies was going to do against France. They had made, I think, a little bit of an upward trajectory throughout the rugby championships. They were pretty close on a couple of times, keeping teams under control. But as Eddie Jones is rebuilding this Australian team, we all know that he's looking forward to the future, but he wants to get the best out of this group, I'm sure, at this year's Rugby World Cup. The French, on the other hand, under head coach Fabien Galtier, were looking for more consistency in their performances and that spontaneity that we all love about French rugby that can be so dangerous against any particular team. And they showed glimpses of that against Scotland, I guess. But also they showed glimpses of vulnerability, which was interesting. So I was always keen to see in this game what team, first of all, Galtier was going to put out onto the field, and then how they were going to go about their game plan. Luke Pearce was the referee for this game, and above nothing else, he wanted to share his French language skills with us all throughout this entire game, which was good to see these referees getting ready for this year's Rugby World Cup. Well, Australia owned about the first 90 seconds of this game, but then the French got down into an attacking position in the Australian 22, and from a line out and a set piece of play, it was a fantastic move from the French, and Jonathan Danty took about 9 Australians across the line with him to score the first try from France. Really good set piece of play from the French on this one. It was obviously a training pitch move that they'd been practicing, and instead of the line out more going towards the line and trying to score a try, they had Danty coming in on the angle and went straight over for a fantastic try to France. So that really gave France the momentum in this game. I think it got the crowd on their side if that was going to be a problem, and it put Australia on the back foot right from the beginning. And as we've seen in many of these games throughout the warm-up series, those teams that can get dominance in the first few minutes of a game, it really sets them up nicely, and I think that's what happened well for France in this particular match. Thomas Ramos got the conversion over for France, so they went out to 7-0, and Ramos started a very good game for him today, and his kicking boots were obviously on at the beginning of the game as well. It was a shame for Australia because they'd put about 13 phases together before France had scored that try, and Taniela Tupou unfortunately did a high tackle, and it broke the momentum for Australia during that phase of play, and they were up in the French 22 and they were looking quite dangerous. And as I said, they'd recycled the ball a number of times, but that's one of the things that this French team will do to you. They will punish you very, very quickly. And even though they'd withstood a huge amount of defence with Australia through those different phases of play, they were able to quickly come back and score that first try. So it was going to be interesting to see how the Australians responded to that first French try, and respond they did. In the 13th minute, there was a good miss-out pass from Carter Gordon that found Mark Nawar Kwantawasi waiting on the left-hand wing. He was unmarked at the time, and ran in to score a great try for the Wallabies, with 2 French guys trying to chase him down. So a good response from Australia, and at that stage we thought, well, this could be a game on, and it was a good dynamic try and a good play, because we've seen defences being very much up in the face of the attacking team throughout this warm-up series, and we're seeing a lot of kick passes, and we're seeing a lot of big long looping cutout passes, and that's what this one was, to set up Nawa Kwantawasi's try for Australia. 7 points to 5. Carter Gordon missed the conversion to that try, and unfortunately he didn't have his kicking boots on yesterday, that was for sure, and he'd also missed a penalty before that. I'm going to talk about the impact of that a little bit later on when I summarise this whole game. As the first half went on, I was impressed by the work rate of Australian winger Vunivalu. He was playing really well, and a guy who's come over from rugby league to play rugby union, and I'm sure Eddie Jones has been giving him his opportunity to shine in this team by giving him more game time, and he really went chasing the ball in that first 20-25 minutes of the game. I was impressed with him. However, as the game unfolded in that first half, Australia started feeling the pressure from France and their discipline fell away, and that was going to be something that was fairly consistent throughout this match for Australia. So France got 2 quick penalties, and Ramos had his kicking boots on, that's for sure, in this game, and all of a sudden France were out to a 13 points to 5 lead. France infringed in the 33rd minute, and we saw Gordon step up to take another penalty attempt, which he missed. So at that stage of the game he was already 3-0 from 3 kicks, which wasn't a good sign for Australia. Now, I've talked about this in previous videos, that number 10 role in terms of kicking for goal is going to be vitally important throughout this World Cup, and teams like Australia, who have only Carter Gordon in there as their real main threat for kicking, and Mani Lebok in South Africa, are going to be very much under pressure throughout this World Cup. And we saw it yesterday with Carter Gordon, who wasn't on song with his kicking, had a detrimental impact to Australia's points tally and ability to be able to keep ticking the scoreboard over in games like this. And again, when I do my summary at the end of this video about this game, I'll point out how important I think that's going to be in the Rugby World Cup. And then 2 minutes later, Ramos got a penalty for France, so it kicked France out to the lead a little bit more by 16 points to 5, and by ticking that scoreboard over, it gives the team momentum every time. Another long first half of rugby in this game went for close to 46 minutes. We've seen that a couple of times now in these warm-up games, so very interesting to see. Now, the rest of the first half really petered out. It was a good first half by France. They showed their spontaneity. Australia's discipline wasn't good. Their scrums were good, they were winning good scrummage ball, but they were terrible in the lineouts, and France were poaching a lot of the Australian lineouts. So that's going to be something that Eddie Jones and his crew are going to have to look at in training before the Rugby World Cup, because Richie Arnold and Will Skelton were not scoring clean ball for Australia in that line-out set piece, and that's going to be a big worry for Australia as they go up against Wales and Fiji in their critical pool games in the Rugby World Cup. So 16 points to 5 at half-time to France. We saw a glimmer of their brilliance, and like many, I'm sure you thought that there was more to come from France in the second half. It was a really good first half from France. Obviously Anton Dupont was doing his thing. Haven't seen that guy play a bad game actually. His ability to be able to kick off left and right foot is immense, and really does help France in situations where they're trying to clear out the ball or whether they're trying to set up a strategic kicking option. He gives them that option. Jalabert was playing in at number 10, although Ramos was also filling that position from time to time, and that was a unique thing that I think Fabien Galtier has been looking for as they head into this World Cup without Intermac, of course, their number 10, who's not going to be playing due to injury. So I thought the French forwards were good as well. Dante was another one in the back line. Every time he got the ball, he looked dangerous. He was able to break through the Australian first line of defence and set up very good retaining ball for the French during the breakdowns. And of course, on the wings, the French always looked dangerous. Villiers, every time he got the ball, he looked like he could score a try. So I was looking forward to the second half. Either we were going to see some brilliance from Australia in getting back into this game, or we were going to see France walk away with it. As the second half got underway, I'm sure Australia wanted to stop the bleeding of penalties. They conceded 10 in that first half. And of course, when you've got someone with their kicking boots on like Ramos did, you're asking for trouble. So I'm sure Eddie Jones would have said to the boys in the shed, let's look at our discipline, make sure we get that right. The second half wasn't long underway before Fabien Galtier pulled the ripcord on changes for substitutions, and we saw 5 changes, all in the forwards. And that was really interesting for France to go to that so soon in the match, but I'm sure Galtier wanted to see different combinations at play in this game against Australia. I'm probably sure he thought France had the game won at 16-5, but he wanted to see how the bench would impact the remainder of the game. So just after the French had rung their changes in this game, we saw a very bad moment for Australia. Vunivalu, the guy that I'd been speaking about who'd done so well, I thought, in the first half, got a yellow card for an indiscretion. Having a second look at it, I'm not too sure whether it was, but that's the call from the TMO and from the referee, so we respect it. And Vunivalu went off to sit down with a yellow card for 10 minutes. And of course, we knew that was going to be a pivotal point in this particular match. Whenever you're up against France and you've only got 14 men, there's only one thing that's going to happen. They're going to start throwing the ball around and they're going to test your defense, and that's exactly what happened in the moments after Vunivalu went off the field. And this is where France put the sword to Australia in this game. Just a couple of minutes after Vunivalu had gone off, Ramos got another penalty kick that put France out to 19 points to 5. And then in an outrageous cross-field kick from Dupont, found Damien Penaud on the wing, ready to catch the ball and just place it down for an easy try to France. As I said, Ramos had his kicking boots on in this game. He got the conversion over easily, and all of a sudden France were out 26 points to 5. When Vunivalu went off, they were 16 to 5 down. So 10 points in a matter of a few minutes to France, and it really broke open this game indeed. But boy, did they look slick and fast when they got the ball and they were moving it wide. And the precision of Dupont to put it almost in the hands of Penaud for that try was extraordinary. It takes a lot of skill to be able to make a kick like that. So very impressed with France at that moment, and there was still more to come. Fabien Galtier had seen enough of Antoine Dupont at that stage, so he pulled him off the field, and after 60 minutes it was pretty obvious that France were going to win the game, and I'm sure there was no risk of injury wanted from the French head coach when it comes to Antoine Dupont, being one of the stars of this year's Rugby World Cup. So then it was time for Australia to show us what they had, and they did fight back, and it was a great high ball that went up, and Mark Nawaqanitawase got underneath it. Ramos didn't get the catch at fullback, and from the ensuing little breakdown that happened, the ball went out to Fraser McWright from Tate McDermott, and McWright scored a good Wallaby try right under the post. So a good bounce back there for Australia. And something I noticed here is that France were a little bit fragile under the high ball, and I'm sure a lot of coaches will be watching that. When I do my summary at the end, I'll talk a little bit more about it. But it was a great try from Fraser McWright. Fraser McWright, I think he's a great addition to that back three for Australia, and he's particularly good in the breakdown play. He was up during that play, got the ball from Tate McDermott and headed over for a good try to Australia. Gordon got the kick over, and a successful one for him for the day. So at that stage we were back to 26 points to 12 to the French, and maybe there was a glimmer of hope that Australia could actually get back into this game. But it wasn't to be the case, and just 2 minutes after Australia had scored their try, Jalabert for France decided that he wanted to show Antoine Dupont what he was capable of doing, and he did a kick pass over the top as well. This time the other winger for France, Vilvert, ended up scoring a touchdown try with a couple of Aussies on his back. So France were showing their panache in this game, and unfortunately for Australia, just a couple of minutes after they'd scored that good try, France had got right back on top of them. Ramos missed the conversion of that try of Vilvert, and France were in the lead comfortably though. Now, one of the things that was impressing me throughout this game was the speed of the French around the ground, whether it be their forwards or their backline. They looked absolutely potent, particularly in the clean out area, particularly at playing the the game at pace, whether it be in the lineouts. They were trying to get the ball out quickly and letting those backs unleash their brilliance on the Australian Wallabies. So something that all the teams are going to have to look at in this World Cup when they play France, the speed of the game. Their endurance is high, and they've got a very good bench to bring on as well. And I heard someone say, who knows a lot about rugby, the other day, they said there's going to be a couple of major points that are going to win this Rugby World Cup. It's going to be the depth of the squads to be able to go through all the pool games and be inflicted with any injuries that they do get, and be able to withstand that in key positions, and goal kicking, because discipline is going to be a big thing in this Rugby World Cup. So being able to convert those goals, and we saw it yesterday between France and Australia. Carter Gordon was missing too many percentages of his goal kicks, and Thomas Ramos was kicking very, very well. And then in the 74th minute, we saw some individual brilliance from the right-hand wing, from the French winger Damien Penaud. He did a chip kick over the top of the Australian defence, regathered the ball, and scored a brilliant try. And again, this is an indication of what France is capable of. The Australian defence was up in the back line, trying to keep tabs on the French outside backs, but Penaud turned that into an opportunity with a kick over the top. And we're going to see a lot of this also in the Rugby World Cup, I'm sure. So in the time that Vunivalu had been off the field, the score had gone out to 31 points to 12. So again, a significant impact of having only 14 men on the field. And all teams throughout the Rugby World Cup need to be warned in terms of their discipline is going to be a major player in this particular Rugby World Cup. So Damien Penaud's try was converted, so France went out to 38 points to 12. And what was left to do in the last 10 minutes? Well, Australia thought it was time to score another try. And that man that I've been talking about, Vunivalu, took a high kick off France and put the ball down. Some people would have said he was offside, but they did check on the TMO and they deemed him to be onside from that kick. So another try scored to Australia by France not collecting a high ball. And as I said earlier, this will be something that many coaches will be looking at as part of their strategy if they're coming up against France in this year's Rugby World Cup. There was only one act to play after that try from Vunivalu, and that was a penalty to France that put them out to 41 points to 17, and that was the final score in this final warm-up game for Australia and France, played at the Stade de France in the weekend. So a fantastic display, magnifique, by the French team. I thought they were dominant all across the field. A couple of those things they'll be looking at, particularly regaining high ball kicks, and I'm sure Fabien Galtier has already got them out on the training field practicing those right now. Players from this game, I thought Dante was fantastic for France. Dupont, of course, was magical. I think Jalabert did a good job. Ramos was good, not only with his kicking, he was very decisive in broken play. I think this guy's an outstanding rugby player. Can't wait to see more of him in the Rugby World Cup. And of course, the French wingers were full of speed and full of elusiveness, and that's something they really bring that's different to this particular game. So really good performance there. Audret in the forwards for France was huge, getting a lot of ball. And Antonio as well, sorry, I meant to say Antonio in the props. Big scrum for France. Their line out was really good as well. They were getting a lot of ball off the top from Australia, and as I said during the video, Australia is going to need to clean up that line out phase. So for the Australians, I think Tupou did quite well in the scrummaging for Australia. He had that indiscretion with a high tackle during the game, but I think he played pretty well, particularly in the scrum and set piece. Carter Gordon looked nervous for me as a young guy that's up against this great French team. He looked like he was misplacing his timing on a few things, and his kicking at goal wasn't good enough for this Australian team, so he'll have to fix that. I thought Callaway played well at fullback for Australia. When he did inject himself into the line, he made a difference, and he liked to run the ball as well, which was good to see. Vunivalu was probably the standout player for Australia for me in this game until he went off, and that really changed the whole focus of this game for me, because when he came back on, of course, you lose that momentum from sitting on a chair for 10 minutes, and he couldn't get himself really back into the game, even though he did score a try. So Tate McDermott, I like him. He's a good halfback and he's a good leader around the field for Australia. So Australia do have the ingredients there, there's no doubt about it, but they just really need to find a way to put it. I'd like to hear from you what you think the problem is, because they've got a lot of young guys in this team that are very, very good. Fraser McRight I mentioned, Tom Hooper's another one. Valentini at number 8 played well at times as well, also had a few discipline issues that he's got to clean up. But overall, I think this Australian team has a lot of potential. Tell me what you think in the comments. So whilst there was a very dominant display by the French and a lot of panache shown in that win, there's a couple of things that I'd like to point out and also hear your comments on, because when we look at these games in deeper detail, we can find where some of the teams are going wrong. Now in this particular game, France scored 4 tries to 3 against Australia, so not a huge discrepancy there. Where the discrepancy came for Australia in this game was their discipline and their defense, because their missed kicks at goal cost them a lot of points. In fact, they left more than 15 points on the table when it came to goal kicking in this game. France won the first half 16-5. They won the second half 25-12. So again, a lot of that was through goal kicking. So I'm sure Eddie Jones is going to get Carter Gordon out there and maybe some of the other guys and practicing their goal kicking, because that made a big difference in this game. And the discipline side of it, well, Vunivalu got his yellow card and Australia were down to 14 men for 10 minutes. And during that 10 minutes, France put the pedal on the metal and scored 10 points and really set themselves up with some good momentum. So it shouldn't be underestimated how important it is for all teams to keep their players on the field during this year's Rugby World Cup. So for Eddie Jones, not the result he was looking for. That's 0 from 5 now for Eddie Jones since he's been back in charge of this Australian Wallaby team. And I'm sure that Wales and Fiji will be preparing accordingly for their major games in their pool of this year's Rugby World Cup. I still wouldn't underestimate the Wallabies. It only takes one game to turn things around for a rugby team. And it's going to be super exciting, isn't it, that group? And we'll see what Warren Gatlin is planning. But after Fiji's great win against England in the weekend, they will be absolutely pumped to go up against this Australian team, with some of their players being fellow bros from Fiji, of course, in the likes of Koroibete and Karevi. So we can't wait to see those games. So a great French win. I was very impressed with the way that they play. I'm impressed with the way that their bench brings on more momentum as well. We still didn't see a couple of their key players in this game, and I think they've shot out some real big warning signs this weekend for all those that are going to come up against them in this year's Rugby World Cup. So that's it, folks. That's the end of the warm-up series for this year, and we've only got, what, 11 days to go until the Rugby World Cup gets underway. Please hit the subscribe button. A lot of people are watching my videos, but the majority are not hitting that subscribe button. I'll work harder to do my job to make things better. I'm going to take you to different places around Cancun here in Mexico so you can see the beautiful Mexican coastline, and we're going to talk a lot about rugby in the coming days leading up to the Rugby World Cup. I'll take a deep dive into the pool stages of this year's Rugby World Cup, talk about the teams that I think are going to do well, but also give you the reasons why I think they're going to do well. We need to have a look at what the strategies are going to be in some of these pool games, because they're going to be very, very interesting. And I think we've learnt a lot from this warm-up series that we can take into the pool stages, and I think some of the teams will be more psychologically in a better place than others. And also I'm going to talk about the trajectory that some of the teams have taken to get to this stage of their preparations for the Rugby World Cup. We've seen a lot of teams taking very different trajectories, and as a result of that, we've seen different outcomes in this warm-up series, and that's something I want to focus on and share with you as my viewers as we go forward over the next couple of weeks. So a great win for France against Australia at the Stade de France. The French crowd got really into this game. It was absolutely pumping. At different times the referee couldn't even hear his other associates in his ear because of the noise that was being made. One can only imagine what it's going to be like on that day when the All Blacks play France in that first game on September the 8th. If you're going to be there for that game, let me know in the comments. I'd love to talk to people who are over there in France. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make it, But let me know if you're going to France and what games you're going to see. And also give me your comments about this game between Australia and France. Don't be too hard on Eddie Jones. Let me know what solutions you think he can come up with. Or is time lost a little bit for Eddie Jones in this particular Rugby World Cup? I say never write off the Wallabies. Okay, that's it for me for this particular video. I'll be back soon with another one. Until then, stay safe everyone, stay well, and remember to always enjoy your rugby. Bye for now.